picture this. It's just a perfectly boring Tuesday evening. You're standing in the kitchen drying dishes.
Right. It's totally mundane.
Exactly, completely mundane. Your mother is right next to you at the counter, and she's slicing peaches. You can hear like a lawnmower outside sputter a few times and then just shut off completely. There's a tiny drop of peach juice clinging to her thumb.
It's such a specific visual.
It really is. And right in the middle of this suffocatingly ordinary moment, your mother turns to you and says she's going to die.
Oh, wow. Just drops it on you.
Right there in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And then she asks you to tell her exactly what she can leave behind to make her permanent absence bearable. So what do you do? What do you say?
I mean, most people would just freeze. It is an absolute existential gut punch.
Yeah.
And it's delivered right in the middle of household chores, you know.
Wow.
It's the ultimate collision of the profound and the ordinary.
And that collision is exactly where we are starting today. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this deeply moving, frankly astonishing philosophical parable. It's titled, What Can I Leave You?
Yeah. It's an incredible piece of writing.
It really is. We are going to analyze exactly how this mother, Eleanor, goes about preparing her son, Daniel, for life after her eventual death, because she does not do it the way, society tells us to. She doesn't just hand him a manila folder with a will and a list of passwords.
Right. None of the standard estate planning stuff.
Exactly. She initiates this grueling, beautiful, weeks-long psychological journey.
Which is necessary, honestly, because the question she is asking is arguably the most difficult question a human being can face. But before we get into the mechanics of Daniel's journey, I think we really have to establish the framing here.
Oh, definitely. The context is crucial.
Right, because the real-world context of this parable completely changes how you read it. This wasn't written as just like a creative fiction exercise.
Yeah.
This document was published by an organization called the accountabilitygap.org. And its purpose is highly specific and incredibly difficult. It was actually created to help surviving family members in wrongful death cases, specifically those stemming from medical malpractice, conceptualize something called pain and suffering damages.
Okay, let's unpack this right away. Pain and suffering damages. I mean, we hear that legal term thrown around on television shows, usually right before like a dramatic courtroom recess.
Yeah, always for dramatic effect.
Exactly. But what does that actually mean for a real family sitting in a real courtroom?
Well, it is the most paradoxical concept in our legal system. In a civil setting, when a family loses someone due to medical negligence, say the doctor misses a diagnosis or a surgeon makes a fatal error, a jury is brought in and asked to compensate the survivors.
It makes sense on paper.
Right, on paper. But here is the impossible task they are given. A jury cannot give the person back. They cannot invent a time machine. They can't undo the tragedy. All they have at their disposal, like the only tool the justice system has ever invented to fix a problem, is money.
But how on earth do you quantify the empty chair at the dinner table? I mean, how do you put a dollar amount on the fact that you can't call your mother when you get a promotion at work?
You can't. You just can't. And that is the devastating paradox of wrongful death litigation. You are asking a jury to do a mathematical equation where the variables simply don't match.
Right.
Like how many dollars equal a mother's voice? It's an impossible equation. And that is exactly why this parable is so vital. It bypasses the sterile legal jargon entirely.
Oh, totally. No actuarial tables or life expectancy charts.
Exactly. It completely ignores lost future earning potential and all that stuff. It approaches this impossible question of compensation through a deeply intimate, unflinching mother-son dialogue. It asks the survivor to really, truly examine what they have lost and what, if anything, could possibly bridge that gap.
Which brings us right back to that kitchen counter. So Eleanor reaches into her apron pocket and she pulls out a small blank white card.
Just a completely blank card.
Yeah, and she places it on the counter next to the sliced peaches. And she tells Daniel that she knows he will grieve when she is gone. She knows he will encounter her absence in unexpected places. And then she issues the challenge. She said, I want you to tell me what I can leave behind that would make losing me more bearable. Write it on this card.
And she doesn't mean a generic answer either. She is asking for a specific, tangible mechanism to alleviate human suffering.
So for everyone listening right now, I want you to pause for a second. Imagine yourself standing in that kitchen. Your mother, your father, your spouse, whoever you love most in this world, hands you a blank card and says, what can I create or leave you right now to make my death bearable? What do you write?
It feels like a trap, honestly. Or, an unsolvable riddle.
It really does. And rather than jumping straight to the end of the story to see what Daniel ultimately writes on that card, I think we need to walk through his psychological journey step by step.
Yeah, we have to.
Because his initial reactions, his missteps, and his realizations are just universally human. So Daniel takes this blank card home. And for 3 days, it just sits on his kitchen table under the salt shaker. He stares at it over his morning coffee. He stares at it after he gets home from work.
It's just haunting him.
Right. And his very first instinct is to treat this terrifying emotional question as a standard problem of inheritance. He starts thinking about physical mass.
Yes, the tangible objects. I mean, he thinks of his mother's little brick house. It's paid for. It's where he grew up. He thinks of the savings account, the antique clock in the hallway, the oak dining table, the china cabinet his grandfather built by hand. He basically tries to imagine which of these physical possessions could act as a buffer against grief.
And he really hones in on the house because it's not just real estate, right? The text gives us these incredibly specific, evocative details. The house contains the scratches on the pantry door where Eleanor measured his height growing up.
The history of it.
Exactly. It contains the third stair that creaks because Daniel cracked it jumping off the banister when he was 11. It contains his late father's tools, still sitting in the garage exactly as they were the morning he died.
What's fascinating here is analyzing why the author roots us in these hyper-specific physical details, and also why they chose that mundane Tuesday evening to begin with.
Yeah, why the Tuesday?
Because the psychology of grief is deeply tied to physical space and routine. Death and grief, in reality, they rarely wait for a cinematic backdrop. They don't cue a dramatic orchestra. Eleanor is deliberately forcing Daniel to confront the inevitable during the mundane because the mundane is exactly where her absence will be felt the most.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right, like the pain won't necessarily peak on the grand holidays. You're prepared for that. You have your armor on for Thanksgiving. The pain peaks on a random Tuesday evening when you want to tell her about a broken lawnmower and realize you can't.
You brace yourself for the big moments, but you don't brace yourself for Tuesday in March. And Daniel's jump to material items to solve this problem is so understandable.
It is the absolute classic human default. When we are faced with a massive, terrifying emotional void, our instinct is to try and fill it with tangible mass.
Yeah, we want something we can touch.
Exactly. We think, if I can just hold the object she held, if I can just sit in the house she lived in, I can somehow retain a piece of her. The physical object becomes a proxy for the person. We try to anchor the ethereal nature of love to a physical anchor like a house.
But then the story takes this fascinating turn. Daniel is visualizing inheriting the house, but then he visualizes actually living in it after she's gone. He imagines unlocking the front door after work and calling out Mom, just purely out of habit.
Oof.
Yeah, and then he imagines the silence answering him from the kitchen.
Huh?
And right there, before he even writes the house on the blank card, he mentally crosses it out.
Because he realizes the fundamental flaw in physical inheritance as an emotional cure. The house is a double-edged sword. Yes, it holds the scratches on the pantry door, but it also acts as an echo chamber for her absence.
Right, the silence.
The physical space doesn't cure the loss, it magnifies it. The silence becomes a tangible thing within those walls. I mean, if the house is full of her, it is also glaringly empty of her.
It's like the house itself becomes a monument to what he doesn't have anymore. So he abandons the property idea entirely. It's just too painful. And he moves to the next logical step that society offers: money.
The default safety net.
Exactly. He actually writes the words financial security on a separate piece of paper and stares at them. He thinks about how money could pay off his mortgage, let him take time off work, pay for grief counseling, pay for travel to clear his head. It seems incredibly practical.
It is practical, yeah. But the text forces Daniel to wrestle with what I like to call the specific arithmetic of grief.
The arithmetic of grief, I like that.
Yeah, he looks at those words, financial security, and he realizes that while they are sensible, they don't actually answer Eleanor's question of making the loss bearable. He starts asking himself these devastating mathematical equations. Like, would $10,000 make the first Christmas without her more bearable? Would $100,000 make her voice easier to forget? Would $1 million soften the moment when he reaches for the telephone and remembers she's dead?
Okay, but hold on. Let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
Because I want to push back on this arithmetic. Isn't Daniel actually right the first time? Doesn't financial security actually make grief easier to bear?
Right.
Think about it. If you lose a parent or spouse, and you are suddenly hit with a $20,000 funeral bill, and you miss a month of work, and suddenly the mortgage is past due, I mean, that compounds the tragedy exponentially. Having money might not bring the person back, but doesn't it remove the compounding stress of potential foreclosure or bankruptcy? Doesn't that technically make the loss more bearable, which was Eleanor's specific question?
You're touching on a vital point. And we absolutely have to distinguish between different types of suffering. The text actually validates your pushback here. Daniel acknowledges exactly what you just said.
Okay, so he sees the value in it.
He does. He realizes that the money might prevent grief from arriving alongside foreclosure, debt, or the fear of starvation. And he knows that this matters. It matters deeply in the real world, and it certainly matters in the context of wrongful death litigation. Juries must provide that financial buffer so that the family isn't destroyed economically on top of being destroyed emotionally.
Exactly. If you're crying in a paid-off house, that is objectively more bearable than crying in a house you're being evicted from.
Correct. But, and this is the crux of Daniel's realization and why he ultimately rejects it for the card, we have to look at the mechanics of the pain. Money removes other burdens. It forms a protective perimeter around the grief.
A protective perimeter?
Yes. It ensures the grief doesn't mutate into poverty or homelessness. But the grief itself, the core wound, remains in the exact center of that perimeter, completely untouched and unchanged by the capital.
Wow, okay, I see.
$1 million stops the bank from taking the house, but it does absolutely nothing to stop the psychological agony when he reaches for the phone to call his mother. The money solves the problems caused by the death, but it does not solve the death.
It forms a protective perimeter, but the core wound is untouched. That is a brilliant distinction. It's like Eleanor has handed Daniel a blank check, but instead of asking him to write down a dollar amount that she can withdraw from a bank, she is asking him to write down an amount of emotional currency.
Right.
And Daniel is slowly realizing that this emotional currency doesn't actually exist on any exchange rate. You can't convert dollars into a reduction of sorrow.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it. The exchange rate between capital and grief is exactly zero.
And because he realizes this, because he sees that the words financial security are sensible, but ultimately hollow in the face of her actual absence, he folds up that piece of paper and puts it in a drawer. The card remains blank.
This realization is the first major step in Eleanor's preparation of Daniel. She has forced him, through this exercise, to look past the illusions of tangible inheritance. He now knows that a house is just wood and silence, and money is just a shield against secondary problems. He has to dig much deeper into the human experience if he wants an answer.
Which means, having exhausted the material world, Daniel has to return to his mother. The conversation moves from the kitchen to the garden. It's Saturday. Eleanor is kneeling beside a flower bed, pulling weeds with a small hand rake.
I want to note the physical setting here again because it's not accidental. Pulling weeds. It is a slow, methodical, grounding task. It is about maintenance, about tending to the earth, about removing things that choke out life. It is the perfect physical metaphor for the philosophical deepening of their conversation.
She asks him if he has decided what to write on the card. He says no. And her response is incredible. She says, good. Daniel is confused and asks why that's good. And she replies, because quick answers are usually answers to easier questions.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of our society, that one sentence, quick answers are usually answers to easier questions,
Right.
might be the thesis statement of the entire parable.
How so?
Think about modern culture. We are biologically and socially conditioned to want immediate solutions. If we feel a physical pain, we want a pill that works in 20 minutes. If you have a psychological problem, we want a 5-step checklist or a productivity hack.
Right, life hacks for everything.
Exactly. But Eleanor is teaching him that profound existential dilemmas do not have quick answers. If you find a quick answer to grief, you aren't actually answering the grief. You're answering something smaller and easier, like, how do I distract myself today? Or how do I temporarily numb this feeling?
So Daniel sits on the low stone wall beside the garden, and he turns the tables on her. He asks, what did you ask, Dad? We learn that his father has already passed away. Eleanor says she never had the chance to ask him because he died suddenly. So Daniel asks, what would you have asked him to leave? And her first honest answer is just devastating in its impossibility. She keeps pulling weeds, she doesn't even look up, and she says, one more morning.
It breaks your heart because of how simple and universal it is. Not a grand vacation to Europe, not $1 million in life insurance, not so. She says she might have asked him to record the stories he always told badly. She might have asked him to write down how he repaired everything in the house. And then, most poignantly, she says she might have asked him to leave a letter telling her that she had done enough.
This is where we really see Eleanor's pedagogical strategy at work. She isn't just lecturing Daniel on how to grieve, she is modeling it for him. She is exposing her own deep vulnerabilities, her own ongoing wrestling match with her late husband's ghost.
Absolutely.
Let's unpack that specific concept of doing enough. Daniel asks her, enough for what? And she says, for him, for us, for the life we had. Why is this such a universal burning desire? Why is that the thing she wanted in writing?
Because the fear of inadequacy in our closest relationships is perhaps the most universal, quiet anxiety of the human condition.
Wow, that's heavy.
It is, but it's true. When we love someone deeply, we are constantly wondering in the back of our minds, am I a good partner? Am I a good parent? Did I provide enough? Did I love you well enough? In the course of a normal day, we can brush those anxieties aside because the person is right there.
Right, you can just ask them.
Yeah, you can read their body language, you can get a hug, you can make amends tomorrow. But when death occurs, the relationship is instantly frozen in time. The ledger is permanently closed. You can never ask them again. So that underlying anxiety, that fear that you somehow fell short of what they deserved, is magnified tremendously by the permanence of death.
It's locked in forever.
Exactly. Eleanor's admitting that she carries that anxiety,
Yeah.
and a letter from him validating her efforts, permanently putting in writing that she was a good wife, would have eased it.
It's the desperate need for final, unchangeable validation. And that naturally leads them into recounting a recent argument they had. Eleanor looks toward the garage and says, grief makes people revisit old conversations. Sometimes they remember only what they failed to say. And Daniel immediately thinks of their last fight. It was about something so ridiculously trivial.
The ladder.
Yes, whether Eleanor should climb a ladder to clear leaves from the gutter.
Ah, the ladder argument. It is such a brilliant inclusion by the author because it is so incredibly frustratingly common.
It really is. Daniel had spoken to her as though she were reckless and incapable, basically treating her age as incompetence. And Eleanor had felt patronized and dismissed by her own son. They had eventually apologized, sure, but neither actually admitted the other was right. It was a lingering friction.
Let's look at the psychology of why this matters. This highlights the exact trap Eleanor is warning him about regarding what we remember. When someone dies, the survivor rarely obsesses over the big, dramatic betrayals, because those are usually dealt with. Yet they become obsessed with the minor, unresolved friction. They don't just remember the big, beautiful vacations. They're haunted by the impatience they showed over a ladder or a sharp word spoken in a rush out the door. They remember what they failed to say, the reassurance, the patience, the grace they withheld.
So Daniel asks her, would a letter have helped? And Eleanor says she thinks so. But Daniel, who was really starting to grasp the severity and depth of her lessons, pushes further. He says, but it would not have replaced him. It would not have fixed anything.
Right, he's getting it.
And Eleanor agrees, no. So Daniel asks, then what would it have done? And Eleanor replies, it might have given me one less wound to carry alongside the larger one.
One less wound.
Oh.
It's a profound distinction in the anatomy of grief. She isn't looking for a cure for the massive, gaping wound of losing her husband. She accepts that wound as a permanent feature of her life. What she wanted was triage for the secondary wounds, the guilt, the unresolved friction, the creeping insecurity.
She just wants to clear the brush.
Exactly. She wanted to clear away the debris so she could just mourn the man, without mourning her own perceived failures.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I want you to pause again. Think about the people you love most. What is the latter argument in your own life right now? What is the trivial disagreement, the lingering petty friction, the unspoken tension that would absolutely haunt you if that person vanished tomorrow?
It's a really sobering thought, isn't it?
It is. Eleanor is trying to get Daniel to see that clearing away those secondary wounds, resolving the latter arguments today, is the best preparation they can possibly do.
Exactly. And hearing his mother articulate these deep, specific emotional desires prompts Daniel to completely change his approach. He finally attempts writing a list of his own. He moves entirely away from the tangible objects of the house and the money, and he enters the much more complex territory of the ephemeral.
Yes, the ephemeral legacy. So that night, Daniel actually sits down at his desk and starts a list on a piece of blank paper. He writes down your voice, the story of how you met Dad, the peach preserve recipe you refused to write down, what you remember about the day I was born, what you were afraid of when you were my age, what you hope I will do after you are gone.
Look at the intimacy of that list compared to, financial security. He has completely shifted his paradigm. He isn't looking for things to sustain his physical life anymore. He's looking for things to sustain his identity.
It's so much deeper.
It is. He wants her history, her fears, her hopes for him. He wants the connective tissue of their relationship. He recognizes that his own history is tied up in her memory.
But almost as soon as he writes it down, he stops. He feels this overwhelming sense of guilt. The text says the list felt selfish, as though he were assigning homework to a dying woman. So he tears it up.
Which is deeply tragic because those are beautiful requests.
Mm.
But his guilt over burdening her in her final days prevents him from asking. He feels like he's demanding emotional labor from someone who is already carrying the weight of their own mortality.
And this is where the story gets really granular about memory in the best way possible. Because a week passes, and Daniel, having torn up his list, starts intensely, quietly observing his mother. He starts noticing all these tiny things about her that he had never thought to preserve before.
The little details.
Yes, the text calls them out specifically. She hums while reading recipes. She taps the steering wheel twice before turning the ignition. She calls every single casserole dish a baking pan, no matter its size. When she laughs unexpectedly, she covers her mouth with the back of her hand.
This is what we call the tragedy of the unwillable. And it touches on a fascinating aspect of human neuroscience.
Oh, how so?
Well, when we think about estate planning, we think about willing our assets, the car, the house, the jewelry. But the things we actually miss about a person, the things that create the texture and reality of a human being, are precisely the things that cannot be boxed up or bequeathed in a legal document.
But why do our brains latch onto those tiny things, though? Like, why the steering wheel tap and not, say, the speech she gave at his high school graduation?
It comes down to implicit versus explicit memory. Explicit memories are the big events, graduations, weddings. We remember them like a movie. But implicit memory, procedural memory, is about the rhythm of a person, the way they walk, the cadence of their laugh, the way they hold a coffee cup.
The everyday stuff.
Right. These are the details our brains process subconsciously every single day. They form the background hum of our environment. When the person dies, that background hum stops, and the silence it leaves behind is deafening. You cannot put a steering wheel tap into a trust fund. You cannot digitize the specific cadence of an unexpected laugh. They are completely unwillable.
So Daniel panics. He realizes he's going to lose all of this texture, this background hum. He actually starts recording their conversations on his phone without telling her. He just hits record and slides the phone into his pocket while they are talking in the kitchen or driving in the car.
Wow.
But almost immediately he deletes the recordings because the secrecy feels like theft. It feels like he's stealing moments from her without her consent.
It's a profound ethical dilemma of modern grief. In previous generations, people only had a few stiff-posed still photographs and maybe some handwritten letters. Now we have the technology to theoretically record every waking moment of a person's life.
We have our phones on us constantly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Daniel realizes that capturing her voice secretly violates the authenticity of their relationship. The medium corrupts the memory. A conversation is a shared exchange, If one person knows it's a permanent record and the other doesn't, it ceases to be a genuine interaction.
So he abandons the secret audio recordings. But the desperation to hold on to her doesn't leave him. He considers a more formal approach. He thinks about asking her to sit down, look at the camera, and make video messages for him. One for his upcoming birthday, one for Christmas, one for the day he eventually retires, one for a future grandchild she might never even meet.
And this brings us to one of the most fascinating psychological analyses in the text: the paradox of modern digital memory.
I mean, at first, Daniel thinks these videos will be a massive comfort. He imagines opening them years later and seeing her face, hearing her voice speaking directly to him in the future.
It sounds comforting in theory.
But the comfort curdles into terror almost immediately. He starts asking himself these chilling questions. Would the recordings preserve her presence or trap him in the moment before her departure? Would they help him continue or make every milestone an appointment with the dead?
An appointment with the dead. That phrase is just haunting.
It really is. I want to really sit with this idea. Imagine it. It's your 50th birthday. You're supposed to be celebrating with your friends, your spouse, your own children. You should be present in that joy. But you have this file on your computer, a video your mother made 20 years ago, and you have to watch it. It's a sacred duty.
Right.
So you leave the party, go into a quiet room, and hit play. You are anchored to the past on a day that should be entirely about the present.
Exactly. The psychological trap here is immense. Daniel realizes that while a video might give him the illusion of her presence for 5 minutes, the moment the video ends, the screen goes black and the silence of the house rushes back in with double the force.
The contrast must be awful.
Oh, it is. The contrast between the digital ghost and the physical reality might actually be more agonizing than just letting the memory fade naturally over time. He fears that by trying to perfectly preserve her in high definition, he will paralyze his own ability to move forward. He will be trapped in the amber of her final months, constantly returning to a screen instead of living his own life.
I've got an analogy for this. It's like Daniel is standing by a beautiful rushing river, and he knows the river is going to dry up soon. It's inevitable. So in a panic, he grabs a bucket and scoops up as much water as he can, thinking he's saving the river. But when he looks in the bucket a week later, it's not a river anymore. It's just stagnant water. The life, the current, the context, the environment, the things that made it beautiful are completely gone. You can't catch a river in a bucket, and you can't catch a human soul in an MP4 file.
That is precisely it. A river is defined by its motion. A human life is defined by its progression and interaction with the present moment. The video is just the stagnant water.
That's so tragic.
It is. And recognizing this terrifying paradox, Daniel abandons the video idea entirely. He is completely trapped. Physical objects like the house feel inadequate and hollow. Financial security solves the wrong problem. And digital preservation feels like a haunted trap that will ruin his future.
So, feeling completely lost and paralyzed, human nature dictates you look externally for answers. Daniel turns to the outside world for advice. At work, Daniel is clearly distracted. A colleague named Marcus notices him staring at his computer screen and asks what's going on. Daniel just gives him a brief, vague overview, saying his mother is arranging her affairs and asking what she should leave him.
And Marcus offers the standard, societal default answer to death. Without missing a beat, he says, you should ask her to leave you the house. Property lasts.
Property lasts. It's such a confident, oblivious statement.
Marcus represents the pragmatic, deeply materialistic view of legacy that our society actively encourages. It's the view of estate planners and financial advisors. Transfer the wealth, secure the real estate, ensure the lineage has capital. To Marcus, legacy is a balance sheet.
But Daniel has already evolved miles past Marcus's perspective. When Daniel goes home that evening, he tells his mother what Marcus said. He says, Marcus believes the house is the answer. And Eleanor, who is incredibly perceptive, asks what Daniel believes. Daniel replies, I believe houses burn, markets fall, roofs leak, and taxes continue after people die.
He fundamentally rejects the illusion of permanence that property offers. A house isn't permanent. It requires constant maintenance, money, and worry. And Eleanor smiles at this. The text notes that she recognizes Daniel distrusts answers that pretend to be permanent.
She must be proud.
She is. She sees that he is finally asking the right questions, dismantling the societal myths, even if he hasn't found the true answer yet.
So Daniel rests his hand on the back of her dining room chair, and he asks her a pivotal question. He says, what would you leave me if I refused to choose? If he just handed the blank card back, what would her default legacy be?
This unsolicited list she provides is a masterclass in realistic, grounded love. It is devoid of sentimentality and packed with wisdom.
She leans against the doorway and gives him 4 things. Let's break them down. First, she says she would leave enough money so that grief wouldn't become an economic emergency. We covered that earlier, the protective perimeter. Second, she says she would leave him the family records because he needs to know where he came from, context and history. Third, she would leave the recipes, even though she jokes he'll still insist hers tasted better.
And then the 4th thing, the absolute most crucial, surprising item on her list. She says, I would write down the mistakes I made so you would not have to turn me into a saint in order to miss me.
That line stopped me in my tracks. So you would not have to turn me into a saint in order to miss me.
It is arguably the deepest psychological insight in the entire text. Let's really analyze the danger of deifying the dead. When someone dies, especially someone we love deeply, our natural psychological instinct is to sanitize their memory. We edit out their flaws, their temper, their bad financial decisions, their selfishness. We elevate them to this pristine, saintly, infallible status.
But wait, why do we do that? What is the evolutionary or psychological benefit of pretending my flawed mother was Mother Teresa?
We do it partly out of culturally ingrained respect, don't speak ill of the dead, but mostly as a psychological defense mechanism. Grief is chaotic and messy. By making the lost person perfect, we create a clean, uncomplicated narrative. We think that by making them a saint, we are honoring their legacy and proving how much we love them. But Eleanor understands the psychological toxicity of that process for the survivor.
How is it toxic? Isn't it nice to only remember the good things?
It's toxic because if Daniel turns her into a flawless saint, he creates an impossible standard for his own life and his own ongoing grief. A saint is alienating. You cannot have a continuing internal relationship with a saint. You can only worship them.
Oh, I see.
You can't be angry at a saint. If Daniel deifies her, and then one day he remembers that she was unfair to him in an argument, he will feel intense, crushing guilt for disrespecting her memory by intentionally leaving a written record of her mistakes, her failures, her bad temper, her regrets. Eleanor is demanding that Daniel remember her as a flawed, complex, fully human being.
She is giving him permission to be angry with her sometimes, even after she's on the ground.
Exactly. She is giving him permission to disagree with her memory. She is ensuring their relationship remains grounded in reality even after she's gone. She wants to be a mother he can remember and relate to, not an icon he has to revere from a distance.
That is just incredible foresight on her part. And she follows that up with one final request. She says, "And I would ask you not to make my death the central event of the rest of your life." Daniel's eyes fill with tears at this, and he pushes back hard. He says, "That is not something you can ask, because you don't know what it will be like."
And her response is brilliant in its brevity. No, but neither do you. She is refusing to let him preemptively surrender his future to grief. She is telling him that his life must continue to grow, that this tragedy should just be a chapter, not the title of his book.
This intense exchange pushes Daniel into a totally new avenue of thought. He sits at the table, the blank card in his wallet with its edges softening from being carried around for weeks, and he pivots to the idea of a proxy. He asks, what if what I want is for something good to carry your name, such as a scholarship, maybe for someone who wants to become a teacher? Since Eleanor taught elementary school for 32 years, this seems like a beautiful, fitting tribute.
To anyone on the outside, a scholarship seems like the absolute perfect answer. It honors her life's work, it helps others, it leaves a noble public legacy. It takes the tragedy and spins it into a societal positive.
Right. I am going to stop you there and push back on this, because I genuinely struggle with Eleanor's reaction here. I aggressively defend Daniel's scholarship idea. Why wouldn't this be the answer? It's a legacy. If I die, I want my name on a building or a scholarship. Even if it is an illusion for Daniel, it's actively funding a student's education in the real world. Why can't a coping mechanism also be a public good? Why is Eleanor about to tear this down?
It is a fantastic question.
Hmm.
And it requires us to separate the public good from Daniel's internal psychological state. Eleanor isn't against helping a student. She is against the reason Daniel wants to do it. Let's look at how she systematically, almost surgically, dismantles his logic.
Okay, let's hear it.
She asks him if the scholarship would help him. He says yes, because someone would say her name. She points out that he will say her name regardless. He counters that other people would say it, and Eleanor presses him. Why does that matter? Daniel struggles, but finally reveals his true motivation. He says, because you would still be doing something.
You would still be doing something.
And here is where Eleanor drops the hammer of reality. She looks at him and says, I would be dead. The student would be doing it.
But again, isn't she being too harsh? I mean, he is hurting. He just wants his mom's name to live on. Why is she challenging this?
Because it is a form of denial, and denial will eventually crack. If her goal was simply to comfort his ego in the present moment, she would have hugged him and said, a scholarship is a wonderful idea, Daniel. But her goal is not to comfort him right now. Her goal is to prepare his soul for the harsh, unyielding reality of true absence.
So the scholarship is a crutch.
Worse than a crush, in Daniel's specific case, it's a proxy to avoid grief. She forces him to realize that a memorial for him might just be a monument to his inability to release her. He wants proof that her life did not simply stop. But her life will stop.
It's the biological truth.
That is the biological and existential truth. If he relies on a scholarship to pretend that she is still actively participating in the world, he is delaying the necessary work of accepting her absolute absence. She is stripping away his coping mechanisms because those mechanisms are based on a fantasy that she can continue to act in the world. She isn't being mean. She is being fiercely, radically protective of his future psychological health.
She wants him to face the void, not dress the void up in a graduation gown. She says, what would the scholarship give you? And he admits, proof that your life did not simply stop. And Eleanor is quiet for a moment. Then she asks, would you need proof of that? And when he says he might, she issues the final challenge, then write it down.
But he doesn't.
No. He doesn't write it down because he knows deep down that she is right. A plaque on a wall with her name on it does not mean she is still alive. It just means a student got a check from a bank account. It doesn't answer the silence in the kitchen.
It is a brutal realization. He has run out of options. Every avenue he has explored has led to a dead end.
Which brings us to the climax of our deep dive, the shift from erasing to carrying. After the scholarship idea falls apart, Eleanor's relentless stripping away of Daniel's illusions brings him to a true existential breaking point. Another week passes, and now the question of the blank card is haunting him everywhere he goes. He hears it in television advertisements that promise comfort through purchasing products. He hears it in mundane conversations about estate planning, memorials, funerals, life insurance. He even hears it in the way society talks about grief, people telling each other to just get over it. The text says it's as though sorrow were a fence one climbed and left behind.
Which is a beautiful and deeply tragic metaphor for how society misunderstands mourning. Society views grief as an obstacle to be bypassed, a problem to be solved, rather than a landscape to be traversed and integrated into your life.
Exactly. So Daniel is driving in his car, just agonizing over this impossible card. He's running through every possible option we've discussed so far, and he realizes that every single answer has a dark duality. Everything is a double-edged sword.
The paradox of legacy.
Right. He runs down the list in his mind. Would memory help? Well, memory preserves love, but it also perfectly preserves pain. Would money help? Money provides security, but it can feel like a gross insult if you mistake it for an equivalent to a human life. Would a memorial help? It extends her influence publicly, but it becomes a monument to his inability to let go privately. Would letters help? They answer old questions, but they sit in agonizing silence when he asks a new one. He realizes that nothing is pure, nothing is enough.
And that realization, nothing is enough, is the massive breakthrough, because as the text notes, perhaps enough was the wrong standard entirely.
Yes. So we arrive at the climax. It's Sunday morning. Daniel is sitting on the back steps of the house. We get this incredible sensory shift in the text. The garden they were in earlier, where she was pulling weeds, is now beginning to turn toward autumn. The text specifically points out brown edges on the hydrangea leaves. And there is a single peach remaining high in the tree, completely out of reach.
The symbolism here is subtle but powerful. The transition to autumn represents decay, the passing of time, the inevitable end of the season of life. Eleanor is entering her autumn. The unreachable peach represents the impossibility of grasping what he wants most, more time with her. It's out of reach, it will eventually fall and rot, and he has to accept that natural cycle.
Eleanor finds him sitting there on the steps, and she sits beside him. She points out that he still hasn't answered the question on the card. He tells her, "I have too many answers," and she wisely replies, "That is not the same thing."
She won't let him hide behind confusion or analysis paralysis.
No, she absolutely won't. So Daniel finally verbalizes his entire agonizing journey. He reaches into his pocket, he hands her the still blank card, and he breaks down his failed attempts. He says, "I kept trying to choose something that could stand in for you. A proxy, the scholarship, the videos, the house." And he admits, nothing can.
A stand-in failed.
Then he says, "So then I tried to choose something that could erase the grief, the money, the distractions, the quick fixes," and he admits nothing can do that either.
An eraser failed.
Finally, he says, "Then I tried to choose something equal to the loss." He looks at the card in her hand. There is nothing equal to it.
An equivalent failed. This tripartite realization stand-in eraser equivalent is the culmination of the entire parable. In those 3 sentences, he has dismantled the 3 great myths of grief: that the lost person can be replaced, that the emotional pain can be erased, or that any form of compensation can ever be mathematically equal to the magnitude of the loss.
So Eleanor folds her hands in her lap, and she asks the final, most important question of the story. She says, "What are you looking for now?" And Daniel watches the wind in the autumn branches, and he says, "Something that would help me carry it."
Help me carry it. This is the massive paradigm shift. And if we tie this all the way back to the source's original real-world purpose, the accountability gap guiding families through wrongful death damages, this is the exact realization the legal system demands of a jury.
It all comes back to that courtroom.
Yes. A jury in a medical malpractice case cannot provide a stand-in for the dead mother. They cannot provide an eraser for the family's grief. And there is certainly no monetary equivalent to a human life. Millions of dollars do not equal a human being. What the jury can do, the only thing they have the power to do, is provide resources to help the family carry the crushing weight of the loss without being completely destroyed by the secondary weights of poverty, debt, or lost opportunity.
It's about fundamentally shifting the goal from fixing to carrying.
Exactly. Grief isn't a math problem to be solved. It's a physical weight to be borne. And this shift in perspective is the ultimate preparation Eleanor has given her son. She didn't give him a neat, tidy answer on day one, because a neat, tidy answer is a lie. She forced him through this grueling Socratic method so he would arrive at the unbreakable truth himself.
I think of it like a physical backpack. If someone drops a 100-pound iron weight into your backpack, you can't wish the weight away. You can't put a Band-Aid on the iron to make it lighter. You can't pretend it's not there. What you can do is find a backpack with better shoulder straps. You can get a better internal frame to distribute the weight across your hips. You can start working out to build the muscles in your legs and back so that carrying the 100 pounds doesn't literally snap your spine. You never, ever lose the 100 pounds, but you become better equipped to carry it forward.
That is a phenomenal analogy. The resources, whether that is emotional wisdom, financial security from a jury, or the clear, honest memories of a flawed mother, are the better straps and the stronger frame. They don't lighten the iron, but they save your spine.
And so the story ends on this beautifully ambiguous note. Eleanor hears this, and she just nods once. They sit in silence on the steps. The peach tree shifts in the wind. The clock strikes the hour inside the silent house. Daniel takes a pen from his pocket. He places the blank card against his knee. And the text says, his mother did not look at what he was writing. Or perhaps he did not write anything at all.
It leaves the ultimate choice to Daniel, and by extension, to you, the listener.
So what does this all mean? As we move into our final takeaways for this deep dive, I want to synthesize what we've just witnessed. Eleanor provided a masterclass in maternal preparation. She knew she was dying, but she didn't prepare Daniel for her death by coddling him or giving him a false sense of security. She prepared him by forcing him to ask the hardest questions possible and by making him systematically discard every single illusion of permanence and replacement that society tries to sell us. She stripped him down to the absolute truth of human frailty and loss.
She was a teacher for 32 years, and this was her final, most difficult, and most important lesson.
And that leads me to a final provocative thought that I want to leave you with today. It's something that isn't explicitly stated in the text, but it is deeply rooted in everything we've just discussed. We spend so much time wondering what Daniel finally wrote on that card with his pen on those back steps. Did he ask for a letter? Did he ask for her mistakes? Did he just leave it completely blank as a testament to the void? But what if the true legacy Eleanor left wasn't whatever ink ended up on that white cardboard? What if the legacy was the process itself?
The journey to the answer was the answer.
Exactly. By giving him this impossible task, by spending weeks dismantling his easy answers, she ensured that when she finally does pass away, Daniel won't waste his precious energy searching for a magical cure for his grief. He won't go bankrupt trying to buy comfort, and he won't lose his mind trying to perfectly preserve her in video files. Because they already proved together, sitting in the garden and the kitchen, that no such cure exists. The process of searching for the answer was the preparation for the inevitable.
She gave him the brutal, beautiful gift of reality.
So, the next time you are standing in your kitchen on an ordinary Tuesday evening, maybe slicing peaches or just doing the dishes, I encourage you to look at the people you love. Think about their unwillable quirks, the lingering ladder arguments you need to resolve, and the impossible weight of their eventual absence. Consider how you carry each other's weight now and how you will carry it when the time comes. Thank you for joining us on this profound deep dive into What Can I Leave You? It's been an absolute honor unpacking this with you. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.